For the country project, I decided to research Greece. Greece seems like such a fun and lively country, and I thought it would be a fun culture to get to research, and I was right. The culture is so fun and passionate and was a joy to discover deeper. As I would assume many of the cultures chosen for this project, the country of Greece is so rich in tradition. The Greek culture is very important to the Greeks, and I'm excited to get to share it with you. Starting with the Greek education system, I found this system to be very interesting. The system starts very similar to the American system, in which primary and secondary schools are compulsory, and these take Greek children up to 15 years of age. Starting at 15 is when school is no longer compulsory, and then children can decide whether they'd like to take a traditional higher education path, which includes traditional learning, a music school, a religious school, an art school, or an experimental school, which we would equate to maybe a gifted, an AP, or an IB level school. In addition to the traditional school opportunities, students at 15 can also decide to enroll in a vocational style school and learn a skilled trade such as cosmetology or welding. These two schools are the last in this system that do not require participation in the Panhellenic exam. I particularly like the flexibility of the Greek education system. I haven't mentioned it earlier, but all secondary schools, traditional or vocational, offer an evening program. It seems obvious to me that these evening schools, as well as the early entrance into a vocational school, allows these younger adults to get into the workforce a little bit quicker. The Greeks are big celebrators. When I think of Greeks, I automatically think of the stereotype that is a big Greek party with dancing and singing and a lot of energy. Like with most cultures, Greek holidays are tied to religion. For the Greeks, Easter is the biggest holiday of the year. Think American Christmas. Orthodox Greeks have fasted for 40 days prior to Easter, and they are ready to break fast and celebrate. The Greek Easter begins with a large church ceremony and then continues home with a large feast and the tradition of breaking Easter eggs. With adolescence and growing up, the Greeks stop celebrating their birthdays and instead celebrate their name days. Almost all Greeks are named after a saint or martyr, and these saints and martyrs have days associated with them that Greeks use to celebrate. Similar to a birthday, they celebrate at clubs or houses or restaurants and have a big feast and celebration associated with their patron saint's name day. One of the oldest parts of Greek culture is the language. The Greek language is one of the oldest and most developed languages in the world. There's actually a modern and an ancient version of Greek, and both are taught in schools, especially to younger children. There are 3,500 years of written records in Greek. Greek words are very prevalent throughout all kinds of languages. Specifically in English, though, there are a lot of government words that we use. Democracy, politics, and oligarchy come from Greek words, as well as the name of Greek gods that make it into our everyday language, like Narcissus, Nemesis, Atlas. And if you have or speak about a phobia, all of those root words are from Greek. As well, if you've ever been to a college campus, you are almost guaranteed to have seen many Greek letters about. As with many family-oriented societies, food is a huge part of Greek culture. Greek food is centered around wheat, olives, and olive oil, and wine, and it is considered one of the healthiest diets in the world. The Mediterranean diet actually became a very popular fad diet a few years ago and was inspired by the diet of the Greeks. The names, the cooking methods, and the ingredients of Greek foods have changed very little for many centuries. The culmination of big families that love to celebrate are a big wedding, and the Greeks do it like nobody else. If you've seen my big fat Greek wedding, then you know. The traditional dances are very important. Both Greek women and Greek men have their own traditional dances performed at the reception, as well as the crown ceremony performed is very essential at all Greek weddings. Both the bride and the groom have a small crown placed on their heads, and they are intertwined with ribbon to symbolize them being tied together for life. It is said that this tradition dates back to the 11th century period. But overall, this is just another excuse for the Greeks to party and celebrate and be with family, and they like to do it big. Everyday Greek culture is said to have contributed to the incredibly high average lifespan. In the Greek island of Ikaria, the average lifespan is 79. Compare that to 72 globally. Ikaria also has the most people over the age of 100 leading active lifestyles. The Greeks attribute many things to their long lives, one being their healthy diet, as we discussed earlier. As well, it is custom for the Greeks to take a midday nap. Stores and restaurants will close down to accommodate this every day. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? As well, the incredible closeness of Greek families is said to contribute to this longer lifespan. Studies show that the elders that live alone often have a poor diet, and as well, loneliness in old age leads to poor health and earlier death. To talk about culture in sociological terms, I'll start with collectivism. I would classify Greece as a collective culture. The Greeks have the term philotimo, which is the basis of their individual culture, but ties them all together. Philotimo essentially translates to sense of honor, and I'll reference it multiple times throughout the dimensions as it comes into play in many aspects of Greek culture. This sense of honor brings the Greeks together as it's seen as well, like treat others the way you want to be treated. And if you aren't acting the way the group wants you to, you will be called on your philotimo. A person's philotimo would be questioned if they are acting like a free rider who's only concerned about their own personal benefit. The Greeks have an us against the world mentality that when you're in the in-group and the in-group wins, that they have all won together because their social behavior is like strongly dependent on every person in the in-group. Academic writing in Greece is often written in the first person, like it is worth us noting. We will recall. This writer-oriented writing demonstrates collectivism, that the writing is for everybody, not just for the writer or for like an academia style culture. This interdependence is largely driven by necessity, as the Greek government cannot always be relied on to provide support. Greece as well is a masculine culture, and I think that this masculine culture also derives from its collectivism. Masculine cultures strive to be the best, and Greeks do this just in their in-group dynamic. They want the in-group to be the best. The masculinity is also derived from a long history of great Greek men, idolizing specific Greek men for centuries. The Greek gods as well as Greek philosophers has definitely contributed to the masculine culture. Greeks follow a pretty standard masculine home dynamic. Men are expected to be the main breadwinners and women to cook and take care of the home and the children. Greeks, when doing this project, actually scored 100 on the Hofstede scale in high uncertainty avoidance. That's the highest uncertainty avoidance culture in the world. As a culture, everything needs to be rigid and planned. They must know how things turn out. The Greeks rely on laws, bureaucracies, and standards to guide them. And this is a long-standing cultural dimension for the Greeks. But after their 2009 economic collapse and the resulting financial crisis, this avoidance became much more prominent. It seems to be ingrained at a pretty young age in the Greeks to become very careful, to not take large risks. Greece also has a very large power distance culture. This is seen definitely in education. Teachers are only called by their formal title and first names are never ever used. The Greek education system is authoritarian, from the teacher-student relationships to the relationship of the schools and the Ministry of Education. There's a one-way teacher hierarchy. Teachers are not to be taught and they are not to be questioned. Greeks also hold elders in this same hierarchy. Elders are to be respected at all times and not to be questioned or treated without manners. These are strong traits of large power distance societies. Hierarchies are placed and they are not questioned. High Greek officials are also often labeled pompous or intimidating, especially to foreigners, but it is a part of the formality and hierarchy in Greek culture for them to act that way. The Greek style of communication is very high context and very unique. The big things I took away from research were interrupting conversation is not considered rude and is actually kind and like a form of your comprehension of what your friend is saying. It's common to interrupt someone and express that you understand what they are saying, and this is definitely a high context communication style. If you're interrupting someone's words, it can't be the words that are most important. Second, eye contact is incredibly important in conversations. Unlike American eye contact, where it is intermittent and okay to disconnect throughout conversations, if contact is lost in Greek conversation, that is automatically seen as disrespectful. Your eye contact is more important than your words. Another unique communication ideal is the closeness of conversation. Personal distance between speakers and friends is much more small in Greece than in other countries. They tend to stand very close, and if we were to experience this style of communication, we would feel uncomfortable. As well, though, if you were to move away, that is seen as unfriendly. This will come up a little bit more, but the Greeks are very laissez-faire. They definitely live in a polychronic society, and they live by the saying that matters can be settled tomorrow. As a polychronic society, Grecians do not place tasks and deadlines on a high pedestal. I think a lot of this comes from collectivism and relationships, and spending time with people is way more important to the Greeks than work or some other errand. A good example of this that I read about was a woman named Lita who must endure a full-scale evening visit with a bottle of wine and even a game of cards just to pay her monthly rent. But however, the Greeks also support spending more time building relationships because, again, they believe in the in-group. They believe that one gets the job done, whether that be specific or just better their life through their contacts and their in-group. Again, back to their collectivist society. Helping on all of that information, that makes me believe that the Greeks live in the present culture. They're not for the future. They live for the now. They live for who is near them now, what they have now, and what they can protect and expand upon from what they have at this very moment. Okay, now on to the fun stuff. I think the most interesting facts about Greece lied in their geography. First of all, Greece is made up of more than 2,000 islands, but only 107 of them are populated currently. And at any point in the nation, the farthest you could ever be from the coast and from the water is 85 miles. As well, Greece is one of the sunniest countries in the world, and it has more than 250 days of sunlight on average. Finally, Greece is the most sexually active country in the world. The average Grecian has sex 164 times a year. It must be all of those aphrodisiac olives and wine. I had so much fun learning about Greece, and all of my assumptions were decently true. Overall, they're an incredibly fun and lively society with intense culture and intense tradition, and I really enjoyed learning all about them.